go, and as you scroll around. But I see Texas there at number one, and Mason. Honestly, I don't really understand that. Um, uh, Look, you're higher on Arch Manning than I am, Mason. I mean, and we
Hmm.
figured that out this past season. I think you're a little bit higher. I'm not saying you predicted him to win the Heisman or something, which I know a lot of people probably will. Um, there is a lot of growth that I still need to see out of Arch Manning for him to be able to take Texas to the promised land, right? I've seen the guy. I love his legs. I love what he can do with his legs. Um, but I am very concerned about what he's going to do on a week in and week out basis when the football's in his hand. First of all, Texas's running game's got to get a whole heck of a lot better than what it was this past season. Um, Arch is going to help with that some, but you've got to have some help in the backfield with Arch, and I think that's going to go a long, long way. Um, uh, Take us through this. What do you think about Texas, and then just kind of take us through the list here.
Yeah, I don't mind Texas being right here at number one personally. You look at what they bring back, and I think it's a pretty loaded roster here. Ryan Wingo coming back at wide receiver. I think he's going to be a big part of the offense. You've got DeAndre Moore coming back. You bring in a true freshman in Khalid Lockett, who's gonna play at wide receiver, and those are all weapons that Arch Manning is going to be able to dish out the football to, and I think that's a pretty good little cast there around Arch Manning. Not to mention Trey Wisner, he's going to be back. Jared Gibson is going to be back at or at running back, and then also their starting running back C.J. Baxter, who was hurt for most of the year. Now, that being said, this offense is losing a ton. I'm going to go through some of the names here, but Jaden Blue's gone. Quinn Ewers obviously gone. Gunnar Helm, who was probably the best weapon, I think, for this offense. Was he the most productive? Probably not. But he seemed like a good little outlet for this offense or for Quinn Ewers to throw the ball to, and he's going to be gone. Not a bad blocker either. The entire offensive line is gone. That is
Yeah.
going to hurt for the most part. Um, Including a first round talent in Kelvin Banks, a day two guy in Cameron Williams and Jake Majors, and Hayden Connor. All those guys are gone. Silas Bolden's gone. Matthew Golden is gone. Isaiah Bond is gone. So I see on the offensive side of the football, I see a huge transition happening. I just think that Texas has done a good enough job recruiting that this is a reload type of team and not a rebuild type of team. Are they going to be perfect throughout this year? I don't think so. On the defensive side
Yeah.
of the football too, I think bringing in Hero Canoe coming over from Ohio State is huge to play nose tackle, and they also got Cole Brevard to come in. They really just went out. They got three interior defensive linemen in the transfer portal that I think
They
are all
needed
going to
that.
play.
Yeah.
That was huge. Signing Justice Terry, the 5 star who they kind of stole from Georgia, so to speak. That was huge. That was huge for
Yep.
them. A defense that is losing a lot, but they do bring back Malik Muhammad. I think that's huge. Michael Taft is coming back. Um, Anthony Hill, of course. Trey Moore. Maybe we see a little bit more of him. Ethan Burke. Maybe we see a little bit more of him. I think that there are enough pieces on this team as a whole to warrant Texas being number one. Are they the most proven team on this list? We'll have to wait and see. And maybe at the end, Mark, we'll just kind of give our number one team at least, and not our whole top
Yeah.
12, but just kind of what we think. All of these rankings
Well,
are
and
based
one
off of
thing to
Dennis
kind of just
Dodd.
put a cherry on what you're talking about for Texas, they lose their safeties coach. He ends up going over to Georgia Tech and becomes the defensive coordinator there at Georgia Tech. And I think that was a great hire by Georgia Tech, and I think it was an inevitable loss for Texas to lose. That's what you want. You want these position coaches turning into defensive coordinators, and that's development of your coaches, and there's a lot of development going on this team as well. So I don't want to sound all down and dumpy about everything with Texas. That's not the case, but I do have questions for them. But they'll have to answer some questions on the back end of that defense where that was absolutely the strength of their entire team this past season was that secondary.
Yeah,
Um,
no doubt.
but I definitely agree with Texas being in the top five. I just don't know about number one. Um, yeah, um, I see Georgia there at number two. Um, the first line of that is the Dogs slumped badly last season with 3 losses. um, look, we know what Georgia's going to be defensively. We just don't know what they're going to be offensively, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's pretty fair to say. We don't know if Gunnar Stockton is going to be the quarterback for Georgia next year, or if it's going to be a guy like Ryan Puglisi, who seems to be
Lot,
getting a lot of buzz right now.
lots of Stockton hate, my friend. You know what? I
A lot
just,
of,
I don't know.
I think, as Georgia fans, right? You guys who watch the show know we're Georgia fans. We're unapologetic about it. It seems like the backup quarterback always gets more attention than the starting quarterback, and I'm sure it's the same can be said about every team in college football. But all of a sudden, I'm getting texts about Ryan Puglisi and who's Ryan Puglisi and what is he going to do for Georgia, and um, I think that this is going to be Gunnar Stockton's team until it's not, right? I think when you look at the schedule, week 3, I believe they have Tennessee, and that's a game where Gunnar Stockton's going to either sink or swim. And then coming up in their fourth game of the year, I don't know if it's week 4 or not, but they've got Alabama following up Tennessee. So in those after those 2 games, we'll know if it's Gunnar Stockton or not. Um, but I'm hearing some really good things about Ryan Puglisi as well. We'll have to wait and see. The weapons are around those quarterbacks, whoever is there, is going to be huge. There's a lot of turnover on the offensive line. I'm kind of concerned about that. But Georgia does go out and get Zachariah Branch. They do go out and get Noah Thomas and add some weapons there for the quarterback to throw to. I think if Nate Frazier can really be the bell cow running back for this offense, I think that would go a long way. And then defensively, they're losing a lot. Losing Malachi Starks, losing Jalen Walker, losing Michael Williams. Those are 3 probably first round draft picks, right? That are going to be gone. They do return Dalen Everett. I think him, when you throw Dalen Everett in conjunction with potentially a starter in Ellis Robinson, that could be a really good secondary. Obviously, you've got KJ Bolden playing safety, and I think the secondary will be fine. I'm still concerned about the defensive line for Georgia and how they're going to attack the run. That's been an issue the past couple of years, I think, by Georgia standards. So how do they get back to a team that can really stop the run and also stop the pass, which they've been good at for the past couple of years? Um, anxious to see anxious to see what Georgia does, but having them at number 2, I think, is a little bit surprising to me, Mark. I mean, we're talking about the ranking after all. I think I would have Georgia in the top 5, but I don't know if I would have Georgia at number 2, just considering, uh, they're not bringing back a Carson Beck, and Carson Beck was the offense for this team last year. So how do we really figure Georgia's at 2? I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Um, Anything else you want to add on Georgia, Mark?
Not really, man. I'm just, uh, it's a wait and see for the offense, right? It was a bad year for the offense, and we all know that. And there was a lot that contributed to that. Um, injuries at running back didn't help. Lots of injuries on the offensive line. The wide receiver room, it was maligned by arrests, guys getting kicked off the team, injuries here and there that always happen. But um, it's a wait and see type situation. I'm not ready to sail Gunner Stockton down the creek. Okay. And for some reason, in most conversations I have, I feel like I'm the minority in that. And,
Yeah,
and I'll be honest with you, man. The only thing I really saw from Gunner Stockton that I didn't like whenever he played in the playoffs was holding the ball too long. And that is something that is that's very common for young players in college football, especially coming, you know, uh, from the high school ranks. He hadn't played much in college. He was holding the ball a little bit too long, and
yeah,
we saw Carson Beck all year have trouble communicating with these wide receivers, and the wide receivers just never really helped him out. I felt like Gunnar Stockton was dealing with a lot of the same things. Um, well, he threw the ball on the wrong side of people's body a couple times, made it a little bit tougher. But a decent wide receiver core, I feel like, would have made some of those catches. So I'm just not ready to say that Gunnar Stockton is not the guy at Georgia. We all know he's tough as nails, and he's a Georgia Bulldog through and through. I'm real interested to see how things go in the spring, and I wouldn't be surprised to hear if Gunnar Stockton has a real good spring and ends up starting the season for the Bulldogs. And I'd like to see
Yeah.
it. I would like to see it. As far as the defense goes, you're right. There are a lot of players lost, but I mean, water wet, fire hot, Georgia defense good. How
Yep.
good are they? Are they going to be great? Are they going to be 2021? It's hard to know. I would think more. I would hope that this defense would be more like 2022. Because if everybody remembers 21, you lose all those great NFL players on the defense, and then everybody's like, "Oh, what is Georgia going to do?" They're going to go win another national championship and have another really good defense, is what they did that following year. So I am confident Kirby can reload on the defensive end and can figure out ways by at least the second half of the season to figure out some of these spots. But it's gonna be a little bit rocky to start the season. Figuring out who's who, right? Because guys that show up in practice and guys that show up on game day are two different things. So we're gonna have to wait and see on some of that stuff. All right, let's cruise through some of these other teams real quick.
Yeah, so Miami at number 3. Obviously, a lot of attention on Miami right now as they bring in Carson Beck. Um, I gotta wait and see on Miami because I would have had them. I think we had them in our top 5 or at least our top 10 going into last year, and they just kind of wet the bed. The defense was not what we wanted them to be or expected them to be, and that was a big reason for them not having success. I don't know that Carson Beck moves the needle for me because he's not a defensive player, and the defense was where Miami had all their issues, and I don't think that Carson Beck is Cam Ward. I don't think he's going to transform the offense and can really be the guy for the offense. We saw that experiment with Georgia last year. It didn't work out. Not to mention Miami doesn't have an Xavier Restrepo on their roster. So I don't know, man. I gotta see more out of this defense before I have them in the top 5 going into this year. Are they the favorites to win the ACC in my mind? Maybe. I still think Clemson's going to be pretty good. So and I still think SMU is growing as a program. So I don't know. I don't know about this one. I think Miami probably has a very expensive roster, and maybe that's the reason for them being projected so highly. But I still have a lot of questions about the Canes.
Yeah, well, they also play in the ACC and automatically gives them a chance, right? So, you know, is Miami going to be in the discussion? Well, they were in the discussion last year. Is Carson Beck Cam Ward? No, he's not. So there better be. Carson is going to have to play in a complementary offense to be able to take Miami to where they want to go. So it's gonna. I don't have questions about Carson Beck. I really don't. For the most part in his career, he's been consistent. But is he a guy that you're going to be able to just put the game on his back like a Cam Ward and just say, "Hey, man, we need you to make a play"? I don't know if he's that guy. Right? We saw that this year.
Mm-hmm.
Georgia asked him to do that, and there was a lot of situations he couldn't. Now, the wide receiver core, we all know it was much maligned for Georgia, and with good reason. They dropped a lot of passes. So you're right, though. It's the defense. I think the Miami offense will be at least serviceable, if not serviceable plus, right? If not, maybe really good. But the defense was what was a big issue last year for sure. I see we got Ohio State there at number 4. I mean, we've already talked in depth about Ohio State today. Julian Sayin at quarterback is going to tell us a lot about, what is Julian saying, right? Um, what he's going to tell us about a lot about what this offense is going to be. Brian Hartline is the offensive coordinator this season. Still looking for a defensive coordinator. I don't think this is the year for Ohio State, personally. Okay. Do they have a top 5 roster in the country? You bet they do. And that's exactly why they're at the number 4 spot right now, because of talent acquisition.
Yeah, and the thing I struggle with with this ranking is having Ohio State as the number one Big Ten team in the ranking. I don't think that they're the number one Big Ten team. I would give that nod to Penn State right now, considering what they're bringing back, and couple that with the defensive coordinator that they stole from Ohio State. I think that Penn State should be higher on the totem pole as a team. I think they've got the best offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator in the Big Ten, and that really says a lot. I'm sure that they'll be on this list somewhere. But Ohio State, just a lot more questions than answers right now, I think, and it's tough for me on February the 9th to really say that they're the number 4 team in the country, or even have them in the top 5 right now. But as far as a roster goes, I completely agree. They are definitely a top 5 roster. And what do you know? Penn State, they're at number 5. We were just talking about you. Um, a lot coming back. I think the offense is going to be just as good, if not better, even without Tyler Warren. I think that they've got weapons at the tight end position, so I'm not really worried about them as an offense. I like Nicky a lot. I thought he was very innovative with his offensive play calling, and I think that Drew Aller is figuring some things out as a quarterback, and he's kind of playing into that 5-star ranking. Um, Even though we were questioning that for the past couple of years, I really like the trajectory that he's on, and think that if he can take another step, then this is a potential national championship type of team. Defensively, I feel really comfortable. I know they're losing a good bit, but a good bit of top end talent, that is. But I feel really comfortable in Jim Knowles coming in and making an instant impact. He did that with Ohio State in 2022 and got them to the semifinals. Really had them almost to the point of winning a national championship. I think he does the same thing with Penn State this year, and at least maintains what the defense has been for the Nittany Lions for the past few years, if not elevates it even more with Tom Allen leaving that program.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. The biggest thing for me with Penn State is who's going to step up as a playmaker at wide receiver, and if Penn State can answer that question adequately throughout the offseason and going into next season, then watch out, because defensively we know they're going to be good. They're good every year defensively, and now they bring in a great coach who's going to inherit, a defense that, I mean, the cupboard is not empty, that's for sure. So, and then you've got the best running back duo in the country coming back again. Seems like they've been there for 10 years.
Yep.
So you've got the playmakers, in the backfield. You feel decent about the offensive line and the prospect of Penn State being able to field a good offensive line. A wide receiver's got to step up, man, because the leading receivers for this team last year was a tight end and running backs.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to see some wide receiver not only star power, but some depth as well, because we all know injuries stack up as the season goes on.
Yep. And then coming in at number 6, you got Notre Dame. I don't know that they could have any higher expectations than what they have right now. I know you're losing Riley Leonard, and I think that Notre Dame fans feel really comfortable in what they have behind him. And I'm blanking on the quarterback's name right now, but um, I think he looks fine. And Jelly, I believe is his name.
Mm-hmm.
I think he looked fine in what we saw in the one series of the playoffs where he led the team down. I believe they got a touchdown on that series, if I'm not mistaken. But as a passer, he looked very polished, and I feel comfortable in this offense and what they can be behind him at the helm if he wins the starting quarterback position, which I think I'm just expecting that he will. Jeremiah Love returning, I think is huge. This guy kind of put the team on his back at times this season. I really like the running back group as a whole. So couple that with, I believe, an offensive line, if I'm not mistaken, that was pretty young last year. That is going to grow together, and I think you're going to continue to have a pretty strong offense defensively. I just don't have a ton of concerns. I like the defense. Notre Dame to me is a team that if they can figure out the wide receivers, a lot like Penn State, um, they're a dangerous team in 2025 and could be a team that we're talking about as a national championship contender.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Freeman's doing a really good job there. I don't, you know, I didn't predict Notre Dame to go to the national championship this past season, and I won't be predicting them again, more than likely. We'll look more at the schedule, and we're going to do a deep dive on Notre Dame, so maybe I'll change my mind on that. But after looking at the schedule, but the season opener at Miami is going to be a lot of fun, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to tell us a lot about this Notre Dame crew right out the gate. And if they can somehow figure out a way to win that game, then watch out. Notre Dame will more than likely be right back in the playoff. Just knowing, what the rest of their schedule is probably going to be looking like, and some of their, normal opponents that they play. All right, let's scoot through the rest of these because my wife's over here keeps opening the door and telling me let's go. So, but
Gotcha.
Oregon at number 7. What it's really all boils down to one thing for me. Is Dante Moore that dude, or isn't he? That's really what all this boils
Mm-hmm.
down to for me for Oregon. I'll just be honest with you. Um, Dylan Gabriel did a really nice job last year with Oregon. Obviously, they were pretty much number one throughout the entire season for the most part after they had beaten Ohio State, definitely, until they lost. What can Dante Moore transition into that starting role? You like the prospect of it. He's been on the squad, right? He knows what this looks like. He's been working behind the tutelage of Dylan Gabriel and working with his coaching staff. So you feel like he's going to be, and not to mention he's got playing experience, right, from back in the Pac-12 days. So it's not like this is the first time we've ever seen him. So we have a sample size of him, and there's been some great. Man, he's made some great plays. I mean, he really has. He was a lot of fun to watch at UCLA, but he's also made some plays where it was like he was trying to do more with less, and trying to force things where there wasn't, an opportunity there. And we'll see how the Oregon roster complements him, and that's going to tell me a whole heck of a lot about where Oregon is going this season. I personally, I mean, I think Oregon is I think they're a top 5 team this season.
Mm-hmm.
So at 7, I guess I would have to say I disagree. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you. I think a lot's going to be riding on Dante Moore this year. Also, how does the defense respond? It was a pretty senior laden defense, if I'm remembering correctly. So, how do they respond in losing Jordan Birch and some other players? Got to dig through the roster a little bit more. I trust in Dan Lanning's ability to coach a defense. So, I think that the Oregon defense is still going to be really fast, flying around the football. I think they're going to be really good. I think that they're going to have some good wide receivers as well for Dante Moore to throw to, but we haven't seen the development from Dante Moore yet. We've seen him in limited snaps, I guess, and it hasn't been great so far in his career. Is this the year that he takes the next step? I think that's a big question. Clemson at number 8. I think right now, as of today, I would have Clemson as my pick to win the ACC, so I don't mind them at
Yeah.
8. I like Cade Klubnik coming in. I like Wesco at wide receiver. Got to dig in a little bit more to see kind of what they have in the rushing attack. But I think that they're figuring out some things on the offensive line under Matt Luke as the offensive line coach, and defensively, I haven't had many issues with them. They are undergoing a new offensive coordinator change here, so we'll have to see if they progress and take a step up this year.
Yeah, not much on that. I agree. Cade Klubnik coming back is a big deal. And he has developed a lot over the last couple of years, and I certainly feel as though Cade Klubnik is on the precipice of having his best season yet.
Yep. Tennessee, number 9. Uh, Look, we knew Tennessee was going to be in this top 10, right? Nico coming back another year, another year wiser, I guess you would say. This will be his 3rd year in college football. I think that I like what he's gotten. Mike Matthews. There was some talk about the wide receiver maybe sniffing around and maybe going somewhere else where they're able to hold on to him. And I think that was pretty important for them. what else is important is that they're losing Dylan Sampson, and that's a huge loss for the defense, or excuse me, for Tennessee and for the offense and their running game. I don't know. I don't know if they're going to be able to recover from that. Um,
Well,
I just don't know much about who they have behind him, but
yeah.
that's a huge loss. He was an outstanding running back. We'll have to wait and see, but I think that the defense under Tim Brooks is going to be really good once again.
Nico, in my eyes, has got a long ways to go, Mason. I, I'm I just think he's got a long ways to go. And is he going to make big strides this offseason? I think there's a good chance of that. But Dylan Sampson leaving, it doesn't help, right? Over a
Hmm.
1,000 yards last year, tons of productivity, and the usage rate was through the roof, right? So when they needed yards, that's who they gave it to. Um, you're right. I'm totally agree. I totally agree with you. I like Tim Banks and that the prospect of him being able to keep going what he started this past season with the Tennessee defense. We'll see how far that defense can take them, and if Nico can take that next step.
Yep. LSU at number 10. We've talked about them earlier in the show, but I really like Garrett Nussmeier. I think that he's going to be a fine quarterback if he can figure out the decision making. I think that really cost them in the Texas A&M game. Um, but I'm not worried about the weapons on offense. Um, Defensively, I think that they've got a great defensive coordinator in Blake Baker, but I'm anxious to see what the defensive line looks like. Once again, we're talking about an LSU defensive line that gives up a lot of rushing yards, and they have for the past few years. And it's hard to believe considering the defensive line talent that comes out of that state, that they haven't been better at stopping the run. But that certainly has been the case. Another year of Blake Baker, I think, could help them. But I'm anxious to see who that guy is that steps up because I'm not seeing it on the roster so far.
Yeah, and beyond all of that stuff, there are some really good things going on at LSU roster wise and things like that. Um, Gonna have some off-season drama to deal with, and beyond even that, when the regular season does get started, Mason, it's a hell of a schedule they've got. Road games at Oklahoma, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Clemson. Not to mention they'll be facing off against the next team that we're talking about, South Carolina, who is returning Lenora Sellers, the best returning quarterback that South Carolina's had in a long time. And they're coming off of a season where South Carolina's defense was very, very, very stingy. So if they can keep that trend going, South Carolina could be one of those bumps in the road for LSU. But with that being said, South Carolina is going to be more than just a bump in the road for a lot of these teams. The schedule's tough, as it always is at South Carolina. Games against Missouri, LSU, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M. Alabama and Clemson both come to Columbia, so it's going to be a really, really tough schedule for South Carolina. But I like the prospect of Lenora Sellers making his return, and they're going to be really tough to deal with. I do believe.
Yeah, I mean he's a great quarterback, and I really like the idea of this offense being really good around him. But the defense is what to me kind of sells me on this South Carolina team and the potential of them in 2025. I know that they lose Kyle Kennard, but um, Dylan Stewart is one of one in my opinion as a sophomore defensive player. I think he's the best in the country. And I think around him they've got a lot of depth. They're not losing a ton when you look at the depth for South Carolina. I think that they are very much a playoff potential team in my opinion. Then you've got SMU in the ACC at number 12. I don't hate this. You're starting to get into, and I'll just look at 12 through 15 here. You got SMU, BYU, Alabama. We hadn't talked about Alabama yet. That's surprising. And then Illinois and Arizona State at 16. I mean, you look at 12 through 16 and take your pick there. I mean, you kind of have to look at the schedules and break down all that. We're not getting into all that obviously right now. But out of 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, who would you have in there at the number 12 spot, Mark?
That's tough to say, man. I think SMU has got as good a chance as anybody just because of the fact of the conference that they play in. And
Hmm.
I hate, I'm not trying to crap on ACC all day today, but I mean, it is what it is, man. Not a very tough conference, and we saw SMU, come from outside the Power Five in their very first year, not even making any money from the ACC, and go and damn near win that conference. So, um, I'm. It's kind of wait and see for me, right? There's going to be one of these teams that's right around the 20 to 25 range that's going to jump up there, and they're going to jump into that top 12. I don't know which team that is yet, and I don't know which one I'm putting my money on yet. But I think SMU is a pretty decent one, and I think there's some other teams around the country that are going to make a push for that as well. Super interested to see what a team like Michigan does this season. Super interested to see what a team like Indiana does this season. Florida, Mason. I'm interested to see what Florida
Hmm.
does this season with DJ Lagway. Texas A&M, you kind of passed on your list there just a second ago. I think they have the prospect of being in the conversation. I'm not so sure they'll be in the top 12, but and then not to mention Mason, there's going to be some of the teams that we talked about that aren't going to make it. Um, Maybe Georgia's offense it pans out where it's not very good again, right?
Hmm.
And it's going to be a tough schedule to overcome that if that is the case. Ohio State, they've got a chance to finish 15th in the country this year, or even worse, with all the changes that they've gone on. And it's not, and we all know how talented they are. They're very talented. So there's going to be some surprises here. I think LSU has got the prospect of going 10-2, but we talked about it earlier. They could go 8-4 this year. Um,
Hmm.
so we're so early on. It's going to take some more digging, and we're going to dig through all of these teams as the off season goes on. And when we get to June and July, guys, we'll do our regular summer routine that we do. We're going to go team by team. We're going to break them down, the whole roster, the whole coaching staff, the schedule, all that good stuff. And we hope that you guys will come and join us for that. Thank you so much for watching, college football fans. If you made it to the end of this video, you're a college football fanatic just like Mason and I. We hope that you'll consider hitting the subscribe button and coming and hanging out with us here on the First and Long College Football Show. This video was a clip from a live show, one of our many live shows. We do one, at least one every single week. Obviously, throughout the season, we do multiple. We want you to come be part of that. And it doesn't matter who you're a fan of. Come and join us. We have a great time in the chat. We got fans from all the way from Boise State to the Florida Gators to the Tennessee Volunteers, all the way out to the USC Trojans. We are your wall-to-wall Power 4 college football coverage go-to, and we have a lot of fun doing it. So thank you so much for watching. We hope to see you around the channel.